Welcome to meeting number 12 of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan, created pursuant to the Order of the House of December 8, 2021. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. I would like to remind all those present in the room to please follow the recommendations from public health authorities as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19, 2021 to remain healthy and safe. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me as we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure all members and witnesses are able to participate fully. With us today, I would like to welcome the Minister of National Defense, the Honorable Anita Anand. Accompanying the Minister, we have officials from the Department of National Defense. And first, we have with us Deputy Minister of National Defense, Bill Matthews, Chief of the Defense Staff, Canadian Armed Forces, General Wayne Eyre, Commander of the Canadian Joint Operations Command, Vice Admiral J. Robert Octor-Loney, Commander, Canadian Special Operations Forces Command, Major General Steve Bowen, and Commander, Royal Canadian Force, Lieutenant General Edward Meinzinger. Please welcome. Minister Nand, I understand that you will be here for the first hour, and then the official will stay for the second hour. Is that correct? Thank you. So if that is the case, Minister Nand, you will have 5 minutes of the opening remarks, and then we'll go to the questions and answers from the members. And I would advise all members, when you take your time and speaking, make sure that you have somehow track your time as well. So I don't want to cut off in between when you're having an important conversation with the minister. So thank you. With this, I'll, on behalf of all the members, Minister Nand, once again, welcome, and you have the floor for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, members of the House Special Committee on Afghanistan. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today.
2001 to 2014, approximately 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces members served in Afghanistan. Sadly, 158 soldiers lost their lives serving there. 7 years later, as the Taliban regained control over much of the country, Canadian citizens living in Afghanistan and Afghan nationals who had supported Canada during the war were left vulnerable. Nous savions que nous devions agir.
We knew that we needed to take action to help those who had helped us for so many years.
Crisis. On July 23, 2021, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada launched special immigration measures for Afghanistan with a significant or enduring connection to Canada for their people. Ce programme spécial.
This special program aims to resettle 18,000 people. It's one of 3 programs aiming to resettle at least 40,000 Afghan refugees.
Applicants include those who had supported Canada during the war, interpreters, cleaners, and cooks alike. Ils sont tous susceptibles de subir.
All of whom are vulnerable to retribution because of their relationship to the Canadian Armed Forces.
The defense team assisted IRCC by validating the applicant's connection with the CAF based on old employment records, and current and former CAF members helped confirm identities when applicants listed them as references. Through these efforts, we were able to support IRCC's larger efforts to resettle at least 40,000 vulnerable Afghans. Pendant que nous aidions à
While we were helping confirm applications here in Canada, Canadian Armed Forces members also deployed back to Afghanistan through Operation Aegis.
que Kaboul
Even before Kabul fell to the Taliban, the situation on the ground was extremely difficult. The former Afghan government was concerned that a mass exodus of people would signal a lack of confidence among its citizens.
limited the number of foreign aircraft allowed to land at Hamid Karzai International Airport and did not put adequate bureaucratic supports in place so that civilians could easily access the documentation they needed to leave the country. And as the Taliban took over, the situation became even more dire. Very quickly, 1 million internally displaced Afghans were stuck in the capital city, desperate to escape. The CAF's mission evolved and expanded based on the dire situation on the ground. On top of participating in the coalition air bridge and flying 15 of the 17 evacuation flights destined for Canada, CAF members were stationed at every airport gate to help identify those destined for Canada. Et dans certains cas,
In some cases, they had to make difficult, life-changing decisions about who they could evacuate.
in Kabul during this period also worked alongside our allies and our partners to establish safe corridors to the airport. Our people stayed as long as possible at great personal risk. We were one of the very last nations to cease evacuation efforts. In total, we were able to transport or facilitate transport for 3,700 people through Operation Aegis. Et je sais que pour ceux qui ont
And I know that for those who served in the war, or those who have relatives who did, it is particularly heartbreaking to see the Taliban back in power.
Indeed, the current situation in Afghanistan is heartbreaking. But I want Canadians to know that our Canadian Armed Forces did everything they could to help as many people as possible for as long as they possibly could. And I am heartened by what Canada was able to do and the difference that our Canadian Armed Forces made in the lives of millions of Afghans, both during the war and in the years following. Nous rendons hommage.
We honour their service and their sacrifice today and every day.
Thank you. Merci, Miigwech.
Thank you, Minister, for your presentation. And who doesn't go to their own? The very first, I'm going to my own Member of Parliament, Ms. Finley, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister and other officials, CDS Air, for being here today. We really appreciate it. It's a tough subject. Minister Nam, when you became Minister of National Defence, were you briefed on the Kabul evacuation?
Upon becoming Minister of National Defence, I received many briefings on all of our operations, and I continue to receive updates and briefings on all of our operations, past and present.
And did you direct a lessons learned study of the Kabul evacuation after the event and you became Minister?
I was aware of the lessons learned aspect of Operation Aegis. It is something that I fully believe in. We need to examine not only that operation, but all operations to see how we can improve, how we can do better, and how we can continue to learn from history. And that is something that the Chief of Defence Staff, my Deputy Minister, and I all believe in strongly.
And are you suggesting, Minister, that this lessons learned study is an ongoing thing?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, thank you. How was Cabinet kept up to speed on events in Kabul during the evacuation period?
In the lead up to and during Operation Aegis, the Canadian Armed Forces provided regular briefings to senior leaders within the defense team and other government departments on the situation in Afghanistan. This was a whole of government approach. Of course, I was not the minister at the time. The Canadian Armed Forces were part of the overall updates and briefings to the whole of government, including Minister Sajjan, who participated in those briefings as well.
Thank you. As the minister formally responsible for procurement and with such a large evacuation effort, what was your department asked to procure to help with the evacuation, and when did the requests come in?
I can say that we were very much involved at that time with a number of very serious procurements on behalf of the Government of Canada. I will ask my Deputy Minister if he has anything to add, but I was not privy to those conversations myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would add at that time, we were on standby to look into potential air charters, potential lodgings. I will confirm, but my recollection is that those services were not needed, that other arrangements were made, but I would have to confirm that after the meeting.
Could you do that and let us know, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Minister, have you met recently with representatives from Afghanistan's National Resistance Front? And what, if anything, is Canada doing to support them, whether in terms of moral or material support?
I have not met with those individuals at the current time, but I can assure my colleague that we continue to pursue all options to ensure that vulnerable populations in Afghanistan qualify for our resettlement efforts. I can't comment on individual cases, obviously, but our government is working diligently on solutions to immigration and refugee program applicants who remain in Afghanistan at the current time.
Thank you. Have there been discussions with allies on what sort of support we can provide cooperatively or through them?
The Allied response, and I'm glad you brought it up, is fundamental to what Canada did. We had not been on the ground for 7 years when the evacuation was occurring. We did not have military assets in Afghanistan. Nevertheless, we worked very closely with our allies side by side in building and ensuring that the air bridge was in place, and Canada played a very active role alongside our allies in ensuring that the evacuations took place. We were able to evacuate 3,700 Afghan nationals, which is a very large number given the fact that we did not have a military presence on the ground. I will ask my CDS if he has anything to add on multilateral efforts in this regard.
So the fact that we are well connected with our allies, Mr. Chair, means that this operation was well coordinated from an international, multinational perspective. I have lots of details and lessons learned with respect to working with allies, which we'll be able to share, understanding that time is tight during this session.
Thank you. What was Canada's assessment of the situation on the ground in Afghanistan after the Doha Agreement was reached in 2020?
Go ahead. It's not working.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll talk about our intelligence assessment and how that evolved since or after the Doha Agreement was signed. You know, from the announcement of the U.S. withdrawal, the situation in that country deteriorated, and our assessment evolved with it. But we have to remember that a lot of our intelligence was based on allied intelligence because our ability to collect on the ground was rather limited given our lack of presence. But as of the 1st of April, 2021, our intelligence assessed that the Afghan government was facing a likely defeat. And as time progressed, the timeline for that defeat reduced as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. And now we will move to the Liberals. Mr. Baker, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, thank you very much for being here with us today. And thank you, Deputy Minister, and to the members of the leadership of the Armed Forces for being here today. We're here to talk about Afghanistan, but I wanted to take a moment, if I could, to just express my thanks to you, Minister, and to everyone here, the Deputy Minister and the leadership of the Armed Forces, for all of the work that you are doing to support our friends in Ukraine, to defend their own sovereignty, but also indirectly by helping them to do that, you're helping them to defend our own security here in Canada, Europe's security, and our allies' security today and for the future. So I just want to express my sincerest thanks for all that you've done in that regard. There's been some suggestions, Minister, in our previous meetings that Canada is treating Afghan refugees and Ukrainian refugees differently. And some of your colleagues who've been here have pointed out that there are important factors and challenges that are creating very different situations. So given the role of the armed forces in Poland, I wonder if you can speak to those differences from an operational perspective.
Thank you so much for the question. First and foremost, I'd like to point out that there are significant differences between these two situations. In each case, the Canadian Armed Forces is working extremely diligently and with the responsibility and devotion that they bring to the table every single time there's an operation. And I, as Minister, could not be more grateful on behalf of our government for the fortitude and the dedication that the Canadian Armed Forces show every single day in domestic and international operations, whether it is in Afghanistan, Ukraine, or here at home dealing with floods and fires. To directly answer your question, first and foremost, our relationship with the Ukrainian government is extremely close and cooperative. That obviously was not the case and continues not to be the case, given that the Taliban is a known terrorist organization. Secondly, the Ukrainians are actively assisting their citizens escape the terror being inflicted on them by Vladimir Putin. Whereas the Taliban, as I said, a known terrorist entity, is actively oppressing their citizens. There's a fight for democracy in the one country, Ukraine, where there is clearly not a fight for democracy in Afghanistan. Furthermore, in Ukraine, there is a borders shared with close allies, and in particular, I would point out the Polish border, for example, a very close ally, a NATO ally. And when we deploy Canadian Armed Forces personnel in a peaceful operation, as we have by sending 150 Canadian Armed Forces personnel to Poland to assist with the influx of refugees, we do so with the consent of the host nation. So I would say that our efforts in Ukraine are facilitated not only by the government there and the leadership there, as shown by Prime Minister Trudeau's visit to Ukraine yesterday, but also by NATO allies that surround this, or at least some parts of this country. And there are, therefore, marked differences between the situation in Afghanistan and Ukraine, and those differences should not be overlooked. Thank you. Wayne, would you like to add anything?
No, I'll just add that our role in Poland is one of humanitarian nature. So we are there supporting the Polish Territorial Defense Force in staffing of their reception centers. Now, some have asked, why weren't we there right away? Well, the simple answer is we weren't needed. The Poles didn't ask. We were ready. We were ready right from the day of the invasion to send in a force to help the Poles. But when the Poles asked, we were there in very short order, and that work continues.
Thank you very much. Minister, I think I have about a minute and a half left, so I'll ask my question and we'll see how much we can get through. We have heard various testimony about the number of people that were on flights, as well as some criticism that Canada could have evacuated more people. But we also understand that the situation on the ground was incredibly challenging. We've heard about that here at this committee. My question is, what kinds of constraints were CAF personnel on the ground facing, including RCAF crews dealing with?
Okay, thank you for that question. And I think the question actually raises a very important piece of context for members of the committee in terms of what was happening on the ground. As we know, the Taliban was advancing very quickly, much more quickly than anyone expected. And as a result, many thousands of Afghans were converging on the airport itself, more or less at the exact same time. Many of them, understandably, were terrified. And this caused obvious challenges in terms of maintaining order and in terms of the pressure that our armed forces personnel were operating under. And as mentioned in my opening remarks, the government at the time also placed limits on the number of foreign aircraft allowed to land. We were given one specific time only per day that we could utilize to evacuate Canadians, Afghan nationals. And the fact that we did not have a military presence on the ground since 2014, but we were nevertheless able to bring our aircraft in, to evacuate Afghan nationals, and to do so to the amount of 3,700 people, in my mind, is absolutely remarkable. And again, I would like to thank our Canadian Armed Forces for putting themselves in harm's way to sacrifice what they did to help to evacuate Afghan nationals alongside of our allies.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Your time is up, and we'll move to the block. The honourable member, Mr. Bruno de Sabre, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you very much for being here, all of you, for this important study. As you're aware, the Bloc Québécois is of the opinion that this committee should be focusing on the current humanitarian crisis and our response right now and in the short term. Obviously, there'll be lessons to be learned, but I want to focus on what we can do now to help the Afghan population, and not just the Afghan population, but all those Afghans who helped Canadian soldiers who are still stuck back in Afghanistan. Now, you spoke about the Afghan National Resistance Front, and you said you didn't have any direct meetings with them, but are there any government members who did actually meet with the Afghan National Resistance Front?
I was not privy to those conversations, given that I was not the minister at the time. I will ask either my deputy minister or the chief of defense staff if they'd like to.
Non, mais ce que je veux dire,
Well, what I mean by this is, are there any members of your caucus that met members from the Afghan National Resistance Front? I imagine if you'd be aware of it. If I'm aware of it, you would be.
We are, of course, very much open to continuing to meet with members of any Afghan resistance, and I would say I have met myself them informally, though not in the Government of Canada precinct.
je comprends.
My question was quite straightforward. I wanted to know if any members of the Liberal caucus had met with representatives from the Afghan National Resistance Front.
I am not aware of any.
I see. Well, we're off to a bad start, because it was my understanding that there were members of your caucus that had met with that front. My next question is, have you spoken with those members of your caucus who met with the Afghan National Resistance Front? But I think I'd be wasting my time if I asked that question, so we'll move on to another topic. Now, in this committee, as I said a moment ago, one of my concerns is to look at what can be done now for the Afghan people. And Canadian law on designated terrorist groups are an obstacle to humanitarian aid on the ground. Has your department issued any legal opinions regarding humanitarian assistance on the ground in Afghanistan?
Go ahead, Bill.
Deputy Minister Matthews, go ahead, please.
Merci pour la question. Juste
Thank you for the question. Now, the fact is that all legal analysis comes from the Department of Justice, so the answer is no when it comes to my department. Perhaps the Chief of Defence Staff can add something regarding the JAG?
please go ahead.
No, le sous-ministre est correct.
No, the Deputy Minister is correct. There hasn't been any legal opinion on this particular topic. Well, I understand, and that's normal and expected. Minister, do you have an opinion, by way of the chair, do you have an opinion as to whether Canada should act quickly to change the criminal code so that our NGOs can help the Afghan people? That's what we're calling for, and NGOs are calling for it, not me. They're telling us that there's a spanner in the works because of the Canadian criminal code. What do you intend to do?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. The Taliban are on the list of terrorist entities as per the Canadian Criminal Code, as you said. And currently, there is no mechanism to exempt them under Section 83.3b of the Criminal Code regarding humanitarian activities or other such activities. And our government is going to great lengths to find ways to continue to provide humanitarian aid whilst protecting our national security so that we can get assistance through to the Afghan people and resettle Afghans. Well, absolutely. And we are in favour of keeping the Taliban on the list of designated terrorist entities. That's our stance in the Bloc Québécois. But the idea is to ensure that our NGOs aren't prosecuted when they provide a humanitarian service to the Afghan peoples. We know this is one of the worst humanitarian crises on the planet currently. There are other crises. The UN has changed its opinion with regards to Section 2615 of the United Nations Security Council regarding keeping the Taliban as on the terrorist list, but they don't punish NGOs for dealing with them. And some ministers have said that they're going to, or some folks have said they're going to wait for the committee's recommendations. But if everyone agrees that this is an issue, why should you wait for the recommendations of this committee and not act immediately in short order? Because these people need help right now. I'd like your opinion on this. Do you really need to wait for this committee's opinion on this, given that everyone agrees it's an issue and we need to help the Afghans right now as we speak?
Mr. Brunel, even though your time is up, I'm going to give a
Merci,
time
Monsieur le
to
Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Minister.
Merci pour la question. Le Canada.
Thank you for the question. Canada does not intend to recognise the Taliban as the legitimate Afghan government at this current juncture. And I'd like to thank you for your question and your interest in this topic. My colleague, the Minister of Justice, would be better positioned to respond to the totality of that question. But what I'd like to say right now and emphasise is that Canada does not intend to recognise the Taliban as the legitimate Afghan government. Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Now we will go to the NDP Honourable Member Kwan. Go ahead, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and to the officials for coming before our committee. And a special thank you to, of course, our military for the work that you do each and every day to keep Canada safe, but of course the incredible work that you're doing abroad as well with so many crises around the globe. I'd like to ask the Minister this first question. She indicated that, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister, 3,700 Afghans were evacuated during this critical period. Could the Minister advise if all the flights full in the evacuation effort?
Of course, I was not the minister at the time, but I'd like to say something very important on this topic. The limiting factor at the airport was not the fact that there were our planes there. The limiting factor was the fact that we only had one slot to evacuate Afghan nationals per day. And that, to me, has to be recognized every single time we talk about the evacuation. Chief, do you want to add anything?
Please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity to add some more detail to the minister's statement. I think we need to look at this in two periods. So pre-15 August, before Kabul fell to the Taliban, and then post-15 August. So pre-15 August, yes, there were some flights that were not at full capacity, and the reason was quite simple. Late in the game, the government of Afghanistan imposed a requirement for all those leaving Afghanistan to have valid Afghan passports. And so those Afghans could not get through Afghan government security at the airport to board those flights. So that was the reason a number of flights before the 15th of August were not at capacity. After the 15th of August, shortly after we reestablished the air bridge, there were a number of the initial flights that were not at full capacity because we were just getting ourselves established with our troops on the ground and finding sufficient numbers of Canadian entitled personnel in the very, very small window that we had was a challenge. I will say, however, in the latter part, we certainly made up for those empty flights, or for those flights that weren't filled to complete capacity, by putting many more on the flights than the planes were designed for. 534 Afghans in the back of a C-17 that was designed for 200. And so that's the type of measures that our members on the ground went to get out as many Afghans as possible.
And if I could just add to that, you have to remember that there are a number of factors that the Canadian Armed Forces had to take into account in terms of loading those planes. And those included weather, fuel, cargo, weight considerations, which all fluctuated with the different types of aircraft that we had on the ground, the CC-130J Hercules, the CC-150 Polaris, and the CC-177 Globemaster. It is, I think, again, a testament to our Canadian Armed Forces personnel and the fact that they're highly skilled professionals who are operating under extreme pressure in a fluid and unpredictable environment, that they were able to do an exceptional job, and I'm very proud of their work.
Thank you. So the empty seats were as a result of people not being able to have the passport that's required because of the changed rules then. And then subsequently, the flights were oversubscribed in order to make up for those numbers. This is sort of the gist is what I'm understanding. Now, at the time with the evacuation, did Canada evacuate any Afghans who made it through the airport gates but were not on the GAC referred list or on the IRCC list?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, the answer is yes. The situation on the ground was fluid. And one of the lessons that we've taken away from this is the delegation of authority to the lowest levels. And so our commanders and our young leaders on the ground made decisions to take, at times, Afghans that weren't on the list because they were part of a vulnerable community, or if there was sufficient evidence to believe that, yes, there was some link with Canada. Those were the types of decisions that our people on the ground were making very successfully.
Do we know how many of the folks fall into that category?
Mr. Chair, the simple answer is no. I will ask Vice Admiral Ochterlony if he has those stats.
Thank you, Chief. Not off the top of my head, but thank you, Mr. Chair, for joining. But just to echo the Chief's comment there and to reinforce the Minister's point, just about the two different phases, just to get back to that, the fact is...
Sorry, maybe I can suggest that we could get those numbers submitted to the committee then. I would appreciate that.
I'm just not sure that we have those numbers in any degree of accuracy.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So you may have...
we were part of a
Please. Mr. Ochterlony, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We were part of a coalition air bridge at the time. So not only were we bringing Canadian entitled personnel out, we're also bringing cargo and allied entitled personnel out as well. So in terms of those numbers, we were not only bringing Canadian entitled persons, but as well as the coalition air bridge. So those early flights after Kabul fell, we actually had Canadian entitled personnel, we had allied personnel on the plane, as well as Afghans that were proceeding to other nations. So it wasn't only ourselves.
Yes, and we have heard that from witnesses who were particularly concerned from the perspective that many of the folks that Canada had identified did actually not make it on the flight. So I was trying to get clarity on that.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. Your time is up. Minister, unless you want to respond to Madam Kwan's question. Briefly. Probably not. Okay, thank you. We'll go to now coming back to you, Ms. Finley, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I just wanted to give you a chance to clarify. My first question to you this evening was, have you met with the representatives from Afghanistan's National Resistance Front? Your answer was no. But in response to my colleague, Mr. Brunel Duceppe, you said you'd met with them, although informally. Would you like to clarify?
I have not met with them. I was in the same room at a conference where there were some members of the Afghan resistance movement. We didn't actually speak. I heard her present some information about the situation in Afghanistan, but I did not have a one-on-one conversation with anyone.
Thank you for that clarification. After the United States and NATO announced their withdrawal in April 2021, what was the Canadian assessment at that time? How long did Canada think the Afghan security forces could maintain key territory, including Kabul?
I'll start with some high-level comments and ask the chief, who was in place at the time, to elaborate. As you know, or as you may know, starting on the 4th of August 2021, the Canadian Armed Forces started providing strategic airlift, which I've described. And these efforts ensured the successful evacuation of 3,700 Afghan nationals. The situation on the ground was volatile and very difficult and very intense, and the fall of Kabul happened much more quickly than was expected. Chief, did you want to?
General Air, please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll go back to my previous statement. Our assessment on the 1st of April was that should Western forces withdraw, the Taliban would likely decisively defeat the ANDSF, that's the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, and capture most major urban areas and reestablish Taliban control over most of Afghanistan. Now, that timeline shrank as we got closer to the 15th of August. On the 8th of July, our assessment was that we had maximum 6 months. Now, as events would indicate, it was much less than that.
Thank you. So I'm correct in saying that, though, as of April 2021, the assessment was they weren't going to be able to hold out. But by 8th of July, you're saying it was very evident. Is that fair?
Increasingly more evident. Now, of course, with intelligence assessment, nothing is ever 100%. No one can predict with absolute certainty the future, and we deal in probabilities with intelligence assessments.
Now, we were told and have been told before that CAF was not on the ground in Afghanistan in those months leading up, but we've also heard testimony that there was intelligence reconnaissance team deployed there for several months before, and the testimony was that they were giving regular briefings to the embassy. However, we heard from the ex-ambassador that he said he had no briefings and didn't know anything basically until the day out. So I'm seeking clarity on that point.
Are you asking the General Air or Minister?
I always ask the Minister first and then defer to the General. So.
Thank you very much. Minister, please go ahead.
So throughout 2020 and 2021, Canadian Forces Intelligence Command provided regular updates on the situation in Afghanistan. And since February 2021, regular coordination meetings between Canadian and Allied intelligence analysts were provided on the deteriorating situation. Mid-July through mid-August, CF-INCOM did provide daily briefings on Afghanistan to then acting Chief of Defense Staff, the then Deputy Minister, and the then Minister of National Defense. Chief?
So, Mr. Chair, to address the specific question, we received in late March a request for assistance from Global Affairs Canada to put what is called a strategic advisory team into the embassy to focus solely on embassy security. That team was in place, arrived on the 24th of April, and its role was to provide indications and warning and advice to the head of mission on a daily basis to inform the the head of missions decision-making with respect to security, et cetera.
Seconds, Ms.
15 seconds. Well, just very quickly, we've heard testimony that the embassy and ambassador and staff left too quickly. They could have stayed even a couple of more days to help more people get out. And the flight they left on was only half full. Can you confirm that?
Briefly, Minister, because the time is up.
Well, I will simply say that the circumstances on the ground were deteriorating rapidly, and Canada's evacuation efforts were contingent upon U.S. military control of the airport. We stayed for as long as possible and evacuated as many people as possible in the face of a quickly devolving security situation. In fact, Canada was among the last to leave and to cease operations ahead of the U.S. military completing its withdrawal on August 30th.
Very much, Ms. Finlay. We'll move to Mr. El-Khoury for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and welcome, Minister. Your member is a representative of the Canadian Armed Forces, and Canada is known as a leader when it comes to providing humanitarian services and helping people in need. The presence of the Canadian Armed Forces in Afghanistan for 13 years in a row, they did exceptional work. There are soldiers that paid with their lives to serve Canada and Afghanistan and the humanitarian cause writ large. Now, Minister, I'd like to know if you could please explain to this committee, apart from their military mission, what was the role of the Canadian Armed Forces to assist or facilitate humanitarian services for those in need, particularly women and young girls? Now, after those 13 years, there were soldiers who brutally killed, who were brutally killed or injured, and they're wondering what has been accomplished after all these years of sacrifice and time spent in Afghanistan.
Honourable Minister,
if you could just shed light on that, please.
once you stop, then
okay,
we'll
sorry.
give Minister the time to speak.
Okay, sorry.
Minister, please go ahead.
Oui, merci beaucoup pour...
Yes, thank you very much for your question and for your preamble. To begin with, let me say that it's a good question that you've asked. Why is that? The work of the Canadian Armed Forces is important, not just in terms of its military contribution, but also when it comes to what the Canadian Armed Forces have done for the population in general.
And women in Afghanistan were able to participate in democratic political processes. A vibrant and free press flourished, telling Afghan stories and holding government to account, as we expect in a democracy. A generation of girls and boys had the opportunity to go to primary and secondary school, then onwards to university. Higher standards of living, with reduced maternal and infant mortality, extended life expectancy, more mothers and babies survived childbirth as a result of having access to trained birth attendants and pre- and postnatal care, and women and minority rights improved significantly. This is what our Canadian Armed Forces were able to facilitate. This is what we need to continue to be thankful for as well. And donc, avec mes...
And so with the leaders sitting here with me, the leaders of the Canadian Armed Forces, the onus is on us to thank the forces for their meaningful and significant service throughout the war.
La question que vous avez posée.
The question that you asked is crucial for those who served in Afghanistan.
Answer that we have to give as we answer the question, was it worth it? You know, was our sacrifice in that country worth it? And so when I talk to our members, and it's a very emotional time because many of us lost friends, lost colleagues, lost subordinates in that country. We did everything that you, the elected officials of this country, asked us to do. We gave that country 20 years to make it a better place. We saw progress on the ground. We saw a generation of Afghans educated. We saw them connected to the outside world. We poured our heart and soul into that country. So it's painful to see what has happened. And every one of us, as I mentioned, has got a personal question to answer. Was it worth it?
Mr. Al-Khoury.
Okay, to the second, nothing I could. Okay, I am proud and pleased to hear what you have said, you and Honorable Minister. I'm going to ask you a quick question. Madame la Ministre, suite à
Minister, following the 2021 evacuation and the events in Ukraine, President Macron and others has been in favour of strengthening Europe's defence mechanisms so that it is complementary to NATO's and to focus on strategic importance of. Could you please tell us what the 2022 budget will provide for when it comes to favouring multilateralism and Canada's role in NATO?
Minister, please.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. As you're fully aware, Budget 2022 earmarked $8 million, or $8 billion rather, on military spending. And we need to continue to work hard alongside our allies and our partners, both within NATO and in the defence of our own continent. So it's crucial that we continue to work alongside our allies, of course, but now more money has been earmarked to stand by and with our allies in order to achieve that.
Now we'll go to Mr. Bruno de Sep for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Minister, you're Minister of Defence. Now, I understand that you didn't meet with the Afghan National Resistance Front. Now, are you aware as to whether members of your caucus met with the Afghan National Resistance Front? If you're aware that they did, please say yes. If you don't think they did, please say no.
Minister.
I am not aware.
Donc, vous...
So what you're telling me is that the Minister of Defence is not aware as to whether or not members of her own government have met with the Afghan National Resistance Front. And I'm the Member of Parliament for Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, and I'm aware that members of your caucus met with the front. How do you reconcile that?
Minister.
I will say that we, under Operation Aegis, ensured that 3,700 Afghan nationals were evacuated from Afghanistan. That was the effort that DND played in conjunction with our allies.
That's not the question. Now, if you're telling me it's for a matter of national security, I'll stop with my line of questioning. But please don't try and circumvent the question otherwise.
Merci pour ça.
Thank you for that. But what is the question? Well, the question is, are there any members of the Liberal caucus who met with the Afghan National Resistance Front? It's not a complicated question, Minister.
Le Président.
Mr. Chairperson, as I have already stated for the record, I have already responded to the member's question. Well, hold on a sec, Minister. I'm aware that members of your caucus met with the front. How is it that you're not? So how is it the Bloc Québécois knows more than the Minister of National Defence on this issue? How is that?
Mr. Bruno de Sep, if we can respect the chair.
I'm done.
No, you done?
Yeah.
You still have...
Non, j'ai encore du temps.
I still have some time left?
OK.
At
Tantôt,
14.
vous m'avez répondu.
Well, earlier, in response to my question on NGOs, you said the Taliban were on the list of designated terrorist entities and will remain there. I agree with you. Do you believe that the Canadian Criminal Code should be amended to help our NGOs on the ground?
Briefly, Minister, please, time is up.
À ce moment, comme j'ai
At this current juncture, as I already said in response to a previous question on the matter, it's important to remember
is listed as a terrorist entity already under the criminal code, and there is no plans at the current time to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan.
Monsieur le Président, est-ce que
Mr. Chairperson, can someone respond to my question, please?
Let Madam Kwan take the floor. Please go ahead for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could the minister advise how many Afghans did your department identified as people who have an enduring relationship with Canada and should be evacuated to Canada?
As I said, we have evacuated 3,700.
Sorry, the question was how many have you identified that you want to evacuate, not how many you actually evacuated?
I will ask my deputy minister to provide more specifics.
Please go ahead.
Certainly. The last numbers I have, and Chief, please correct me if I'm out of date, 3,800 validated by D&D and forwarded to IRCC, but Chief may have more current information.
No, Mr. Chair, those numbers are accurate. We received somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,500 inquiries or Afghans that were interested, but we were able to validate about 3,800 that had an enduring relationship with the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, so 3,800 were validated, but on the 3,700 that were evacuated, how many of those 3,700 were the ones that the department identified?
Okay, General Ayer, please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have those numbers in front of me. The numbers we're talking about are as of the 1st of April of this year. It's important to note that after the evacuation efforts ceased, that requests still kept coming in. And in fact, they come in to this day.
I wonder if the officials then can table to this committee the numbers for the entire period. So how many were identified before the fall of Kabul? How many were identified after the fall of Kabul? How many were evacuated during the two periods? And between the 4th and 15th of August 2021 and between the 15th and 26th of August 2021 and then thereafter. And if we can get that breakdown. And then also, if we can get that information tabled to the committee. And I'm also interested in knowing how many have been left behind. And does the officials of the department track the numbers of those that were referred to IRCC? How many of those that were referred to IRCC have subsequently been evacuated or made it out of Afghanistan to safety here in
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. Your time is up, but I will give Deputy Minister Matthews time
quickly,
to...
We can, I'm not sure we have the level of granularity the member is looking for, but the numbers I have in terms of the 3,800 validated, 900 have been accepted, plus their families. I don't have a number of what the family number would add to the 900.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. Your time is up, and we're going to Mr. Ruff for, let me say, 7 minutes. So 3 minutes and a half and 3 minutes half to the Liberals. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. And first off, my thanks to General Ayer, Admiral Lochner-Loney, General Meisinger, and General Boivin. I know all four of you very well and have had the pleasure and honor of serving with you, and I know you continue to serve the Canadian Armed Forces, Canada, and all the members to the highest esteem. And General Meisinger, just on the record, all the best in your upcoming retirement. Hopefully you have more time to continue on your hockey game. So my first is a comment to you, Minister. I just want to put it on the record. I disagree with what you stated earlier when you said that when you're comparing what's going on in Ukraine and Afghanistan, about there not being a fight for democracy ongoing in Afghanistan. There absolutely is a fight for democracy going on in that country.
I need
Minister,
to clarify.
one person at a time, please. I'll give you the time, Minister, to respond. Let the member finish, please.
Yeah, so I acknowledge I heard your comment there. So my next question would be, who was the lead government department for
Mr.
the...
Raff, can I, because for the interpretation purposes, do you want Minister to respond? Minister, please go ahead.
I would just like to respond and clarify. I need to be clear that there is an ongoing conflict where the legitimate government in power, a democracy, is fighting for its sovereignty. I recognize that there was some ambiguity in my earlier remarks, and I would like to clarify that I do recognize that. Of course I do, and thank you for raising it so I could make that clarification.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rao.
Who was the lead government department for the evacuation of Afghanistan?
This was a whole of government approach. D&D worked with IRCC, worked with Foreign Affairs and GAC very closely in ensuring that we were all working hand in hand to ensure the evacuation of as many Afghan nationals as possible. As the chief was on the ground at the time, I'll ask him if he has anything to add.
General Air, please go ahead.
27th of July, we received a request for assistance to support this operation from GAC and IRCC. So D&D, CAF were in support.
Yeah, so yeah, fully acknowledge that D&D was in support. My question to the minister was, who was the lead government department? And just so you know, when we had GAC officials here last Monday, they made it very clear, according to law, they are the lead department for these type of evacuations.
Do you want the minister to respond?
No, I mean, I'm good with that. My next question would be to the military members here. You stated that the strategic advisory team went in for security purposes after, I think, on April the 1st. What was the composition of that force? Was it a combination of special forces, military, or regular force personnel?
So, Mr. Chair, for reasons of operational security, we're not going to get into the exact composition of the team, but I'm going to turn it over to the commander of our Special Operations Forces Command, Major General Steve Boivin, to say what he can without compromising ourselves.
Mr. Boivin, briefly, because the time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we deployed the strategic advisory team on the 24th of April. So they reached Afghanistan on the 24th of April in support of the ambassador in order to contingency plan for a potential evacuation of the Canadian embassy. We always task tailor these teams. So depending on the situation and the task that is assigned to the Canadian Special Operations Forces Command, we send a team that is of an appropriate size with the appropriate capabilities to deliver on the task that is assigned to us. In this specific case, it was a very small team in single-digit numbers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raff. We will go to our last speaker before we let the minister go. Mr. Sidhu, for 3.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Minister, first and foremost, I'd like to thank you and the entire armed forces for your tireless efforts. It was not an easy situation, as you mentioned earlier. We did not have significant assets on the ground, but we were able to lean on our allies for some support as we did not have an active role in Afghanistan for some years now. Speaking about limited resources, and considering the situation during that time, can you please tell this committee on how Canada maximized the number of people we evacuated? Love to hear from yourself or any one of your leadership here with you today.
Minister Nand.
To begin, this is a very important piece of information that you're asking for at the current time. What we did to determine how many passengers could load onto an aircraft, our RCAF air crew had to take into account a number of factors, as I previously mentioned, some of them to ensure that the Afghan nationals in question could reach their destination. The highest priority in balancing those factors that I mentioned earlier was the safety of the individuals being transported. I think that we can all appreciate here the level of rigor that goes into ensuring that each and every flight is conducted in a safe manner. Our aircraft were originally configured to safely carry a certain maximum number of people. We did update this configuration to accommodate additional people to the degree possible, taking into account the factors at play, the type of aircraft, the weather, the situation on the ground, etc. Those are all points that General Ayer has alluded to as well, but I will ask him if he has anything else to add.
General Ayer.
So, Mr. Chair, first let me say the fact that we are able to project combat power from Canada into a contested environment on the other side of the world where we had not had a military presence for 7 years and rescue 3,700 people is pretty amazing when you think about it. So how were we able to do that? One, we took advantage of the strategic lift capability that we had, specifically in the form of the C-17s. Two, the strategic communications aspect that we had, where we were able to monitor the situation and feed minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour intelligence and communications back and forth across the globe. Three, we took advantage of the incredible network of partners and allies we have around the world and our embedded staff that we have in leadership positions in such places as U.S. Central Command headquarters, in such places as outside the Joint Staff Office, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Office in the Pentagon, with our task force in Kuwait, where we housed many of the Afghans that we brought out, with our personnel in the Combined Air Operations Center in the KAOK, as we call it, in Qatar. So leveraging that network allowed us to very efficiently work with our allies and make sure this was well coordinated. And if we want to get into more details, beside me here, I have Vice Admiral Ochterlony, who managed many of those details on an hour-to-hour basis, but time may be limiting us here.
Time is up, Mr. Vice Admiral Ochterlony. Go ahead, briefly.
Well, thank you very much. And just following the Chief, I think he mentioned the key points there. The fact is, having folks embedded with the alliances, the authorities necessary, the strategic lift, and the readiness of our forces enabled us to do this. So 2 key points I just want to highlight. We were able to put folks forward very quickly, and we operated at the speed of crisis. So the crisis, we saw it evolving over a period of weeks, and then we made sure we had folks forward, working with our allies to enable us to happen on the ground. And as we got back to, we can examine this further when we have more time after the minister, but I think one of the key parts is to delineate between the 2 periods of time. The fact is, when we were in crisis to evacuate after Kabul fell, you saw that the people on the ground had the authorities necessary to execute the mission. So it was that major on the ground in Kaya, and it was that young captain flying the C-17 that made the decision to embark 534 people on board. That wasn't my decision. It was delegated to the lowest level. So that aircraft captain flying the C-17, young captain, and a young captain co-pilot, they made the decision to save 535 people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sidhu. Time is up. And on behalf of the committee members, I would love to thank Minister Anand for being here and having an important conversation. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and we'll let meeting suspend for a few minutes. So if you want to have a discussion with Minister informally, I'll give you a few minutes. If not, then we'll go back to the official soon. Okay. Again. We will now continue with our second panel. I will thank the Honorable Chief General Air, you and the leadership team, and Deputy Minister, for you to stay with us for the next hour to have an important conversation with the honorable members. It went really well in the first hour, and I will hope to continue in the same tone and be respectful of the time and the position that person is taking. And now we'll go to Mr. Ruff for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So I just want to build on the sort of question, or off of the one around the Strategic Advisory Team, but not so much about that, but about the embassy and the force protection elements. And it's maybe a question more for you, Admiral Ochterlony. When did we pull out our military personnel from the force protection task at the embassy in Kabul?
Mr. Ochterlony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that just goes back to our earlier comments. The fact is there was, as noted by the Chief, we put the Strategic Advisory Team in, as well as, so the SAT team was in Kabul, and as well as the Force Protection Team.
Yeah. Talking about that original Force Protection Team task that we had at the embassy back in the day, that was doing force protection at the embassy for the ambassador. Did that switch out from being it was a small number? I don't want to get into specifics.
Thanks very much. That predated me because I was away from CJOC for 3 years. I'll give it to Chief.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I was actually on the ground in Afghanistan 2014 when we lowered the flag at ISAF headquarters and the Canadians moved out. And that's when Operation Addenda was established to provide force protection for the Canadian Embassy. I do not know the exact year that we transitioned that to a private security company. I believe it was in the 2017, 2018 timeframe, but we'll be able to take that on notice.
Yeah, if you could just pass that back to the committee, it'd be appreciated. So with AFGH, and I guess my question would be, was that the name of the op immediately starting in April under, then my question would be, was it a CANSOF or a CJOC supported commander function or operation?
So, Mr. Chair, the AFGH began on the 30th of July with me issuing what's called a CDS directive to begin the operation, which was focused on the evacuation.
So prior to that, CANSOF would have been the supported commander?
Yeah, we generally don't give named operations to a strategic advisory team with an embassy.
Gotcha. But he was CANSOF was, gotcha.
Yes.
On the, from the lessons learned that the minister mentioned and acknowledged that was ongoing since it, who led the D&D or the CAF, I should say, portion of the lessons learned process? Was it an SGS CJOC lead, or who led it?
So, Mr. Chair, as you'll remember, we conduct after-action reviews at each level. So SOFCOM conducted their own after-action review, CJOC conducted their own, and we did a Canadian Armed Forces one led by SJS.
Would it be possible to get a copy of that report, even if it has to be vetted, I guess, to some extent, although there are members of the committee that do have the appropriate security clearances?
So it is a classified report. I'm not sure of the rules that surround that, but we'll have to take that one away and find out what the rules are.
Please, if you could get back to us on that. Was there an interdepartmental between the different departments, and maybe this is more for the Deputy Minister, lessons learned or after-action process?
Deputy Minister Matthews, please go ahead.
Certainly, I'm aware there's conversations about lessons learned. I will have to get back and check and see if it's a formal lessons learned. There's certainly been dialogue. I don't know if it's as formal as what the Chief mentioned, but the Chief may be aware.
So we've provided input to a PCO-led after-action or post-operation review. I've not seen the output of that.
All right, but you were invited to provide input, but you weren't at obviously at the PCO table. We'll see what we can do about getting back on that. Again, this would be maybe for the deputy, but actually it may be for those in uniform. What was the impact when the election was called in the midst of this evacuation off? What changed?
Deputy Minister?
I was not in the department at that time, so I will have to ask the Chief if he noticed any change in posture.
General Air?
So, Mr. Chair, as you know, during the election period, the minister still retained his authorities as minister, so that where we sought authorities from, the daily briefings, that did not change. Probably the most challenging aspect was the ability to communicate and the tighter control and the ability to discuss publicly what was happening. That being said, there were a number of technical briefings, not for attribution. Admiral Ochterlony was our speaker at those for the most part. We did one for attribution shortly after the evacuation effort ceased. I was one that briefed, and that one was for attribution.
So I guess to get into sort of what's going on right now, and this is maybe for you, General Eyre, or maybe General Boivin, based on I know your time on the ground there more than likely the other members. Are you surprised at all by the horrendous or heinous behavior of the Taliban, especially with respect to what's ongoing right now in that country to women and children and visible minorities?
General Eyre?
Mr. Chair, from my time there, from our time that we served there together in Kandahar, no, I am not surprised. They have not changed their approach from when they ruled the country in the 1990s.
So, Major General Boban, you want to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My answer is very much in line with the answer from the Chief of the Defense Staff. I am absolutely not surprised by their behavior. They are loyal to their history. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapp.
Yeah, my final question here, and again back to you, General Eyre, is where did we fail? You were the that omelet commander, one of the first on the ground in Afghanistan, and I've publicly stated we obviously failed to prep the Afghan security forces during our duration. We did our best, but just your personal take. Where did we fail to make sure Afghanistan didn't fall again to the Taliban?
General Eyre, honourable members, time is up, but briefly respond, please.
So, Mr. Chair, I've been thinking about this question for the last 15 years. Since serving there in 2007, and it could be a number of different areas, but the premise of where did we fail, I'm not sure is accurate, because we provided some excellent training, some excellent equipment. There's an interesting book that I'll recommend. It's called A Question of Command by Mark Moyer, and it discusses the importance of leadership in counterinsurgency and insurgency operations, and how the elites of a country have to take ownership of the fight, how the elites have to lead, how the elites have to set the example for all to follow. And so with the endemic corruption in the country at the time, it was hard for the elites to have that credibility with the average person. And so, again, just my own personal opinion, but one I've reflected on a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapp. Your time is up, and we will go to Honourable Member Sister Jahid for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all of you for appearing before the committee. Thanks to all the Canadians and serving in the armed forces for the work which you do here for the Canadians as well as across the world. So. My first question is that I think we all wish that Canada could have evacuated more people. As mentioned, that Canada evacuated 3,700 people. And I want to take the opportunity to thank you for making sure that we could get those 3,700 members, Afghans out. And thank you to all the national defense people who supported the evacuation air bridge effort. But I think it's worth us, for the committee members, understanding the reality on the ground and the barriers that existed when we talk about staying longer or doing more earlier in terms of evacuation flights. So can you walk us through some of the challenges and the barriers that we're facing there?
So, Mr. Chair, if I understand the question correctly, is it could we have stayed longer to conduct more evacuation flights?
Could have started earlier. So, what were the challenges which were faced?
Okay, so in terms of starting earlier, we started very shortly after the request came in. And, given it's called ramp space and it's called slots, the number of slots that we could have for Canada limited the number of flights that we could put in. In terms of staying longer, the deteriorating security situation on the ground, the fact that our allies, namely the U.S., were withdrawing on the 30th of August meant that we had to cease evacuation operations on the 26th of August. Because after that date, the focus was on reducing the security perimeter around Kabul International Airport. You've got to realize that the perimeter around that airfield was, 14 or 15 kilometers, and took a sizable force to be able to secure. So very, very dangerous operation to withdraw, to collapse a security perimeter while surrounded and ensure the safety and security of your own forces and get them out. Let me just say, you don't want to be the last flight out of there where there is no security perimeter in place. And so the 26th was the last day that we could that we, in conjunction with our allies, that we could conduct evacuation operations. In fact, we did get some Afghans out on the 27th, but that was due to some low-level coordination. But that was the reality on the ground.
So as of 23rd August, Canada secured a guaranteed landing time each day. So how many landing times were given to each of the other allied nations participating in the air bridge?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have that answer. I'll ask Admiral Octoloni. Perhaps he does.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good question. The fact is we were limited our ability in terms of slot times into Hamid Karzai International Airport at the time. So both before the fall of Kabul and then after the fall of Kabul. So we had one slot time before and then one after, which we actually coordinated after the fall of Kabul. We were working with the Allied Air Bridge, which we were assigned a slot time. So we actually took that slot time to conduct our evacuations in conjunction with our allies. And because we had folks forward deployed in the Kayak and Qatar, we were able to actually adjust our slot time to go later in the day after our first few flights, because we wanted to go based on force protection and based on the temperature, which was lower in the middle of the night. We actually switched our times to the middle of the night to get more people out, because the air density is higher in the evening, so you can actually fly more in the middle of the night. But that was actually coordination done because we had folks in Qatar, and we were doing that liaison on the ground as well as with our allies in Qatar.
This operation was whole of government's approach. So how DND worked with the other departments like GAC and IRCC in regards to this evacuation of the Afghans?
Vice Admiral Octoloni or General Air?
So, Mr. Chair, one of the success stories that we saw, or one of the points to sustain out of this operation, were the daily interdepartmental task force meetings at the assistant deputy minister level. And we had, if not daily, almost every second day at the deputy minister CDS level to ensure that coordination at the most senior levels. On the ground, we also had good coordination as well. So that level of interdepartmental cooperation is something that needs to be sustained. I'm happy to report that it's gotten even better over the course of this Ukraine crisis as well.
Cecilia, you have 1 minute to go.
Anything further in regards to the evacuation you would like to add, or anything?
Yeah. No, Mr. Chair, I would just like to add that I am extremely proud of the work that our people did during the course of this crisis in some very, very trying circumstances. We had one member on the ground who had, I believe, 10 or 12 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, and had seen some pretty horrendous things, but reported back that this was the most intense, emotionally draining 2-week period of his life. And so the work that our people did on the ground was nothing short of outstanding.
Thank you very much. Time is almost up, and we will go to Mr. Brunel de Sapar, 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here, honestly, and for your service. We know how the members of the Canadian Armed Forces really care about the well-being of the Afghan population, brothers in arms, as it were, who helped the Canadian soldiers out in the battlefield. And I know that you are standing with and behind the Afghan people. That much is obvious. The Aegis operations purpose is to evacuate Afghans who have significant or enduring ties with the government of Canada. That's a description in some ways of the mission. Now, for everyone's edification who's listening to this committee's deliberations, what are the decisive criteria to establish those ties, i.e. significant and enduring ones?
General Air.
So, Mr. Chair, first let me correct the premise of the role or the purpose of Operation Aegis. And it wasn't just to evacuate Afghans. It was also to evacuate Canadian citizens, Canadian entitled people. And it's interesting to note, those that were listed on the ROCA, it's the registration of Canadians abroad, went up exponentially in the days after Kabul fell. And so when we're thinking, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we're dealing with what we thought was a certain number, that number went up exponentially of those who wanted to get out. You know, in terms of the criteria of what constitutes an enduring relationship, it was generally a witness statement from somebody who had served with the member. And, you know, I myself received many emails from Afghans that I had served with, that I had worked with, and I would vouch for their credibility. Yes, they did serve with Canadians. Yes, they did serve with the Canadian Forces. I served with, and you'd say, I served with so-and-so, with this individual for this period, and that would form the basis of the validation. That coupled with the employment records that we had. Now, you also have to realize that some of the employment records we had were 10, 15 years old, in some cases in digitized form, difficult to recover. So it was a combination of this type of information, records plus personal attestations.
Merci.
Well, thank you very much for that answer, which helps me to understand things much better. So thanks for the detail. We know that there are a lot of veterans groups who served in Afghanistan who were successful in some cases, but some groups gave up because it was too difficult, too tough to help their brothers in arms. Did you have any contact with those veterans groups? They have told us that it was so difficult for them, even in terms of their mental health, because there were promises that were given or made to their brothers in arms and they weren't able to get them out. So I wonder if you've had any contact with those groups and could elaborate on that, please.
General Air.
So, Mr. Chair, I have personally had contact with a number of the members of those groups because I, too, felt the same sort of distress when Afghans that I'd served with would reach out to me and I was not able to support them the way I would like. I had to be very careful as well as the Chief of Defense Staff not to have a conflict of interest and give certain priority or precedence to Afghans just because I knew them. So it was a difficult spot. You know, I will say over the course of this operation, we were inundated with requests for specific Afghans at specific locations, people of influence, individuals in different walks of Canadian life contacting us, in fact, overwhelming our communication systems with their individual pleas for their individual Afghans to rescue them. And so information management was a challenge as systems became clogged.
Mr. Brunel Desab.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. When Canada cooperates with interpreters or any foreigners who assist in our military operations, I imagine that those folks are subject to significant verifications on the part of the Canadian Armed Forces, right?
Chief here.
Mr. Chair, there's varying degrees of interpreter clearance depending on the roles that we are having them do. And so some will be granted, full security clearance based on the roles and the intelligence they're going to be access to. Others that are hired locally, the screening is less intense, and they are not given the same sort of access to or exposure to intelligence. I'll turn it over to Vice Admiral Ochterlony, who currently runs our ongoing operations and can talk to that in more detail.
Vice Admiral Octoloni, I will go back to the member first.
Merci.
But if I may, unfortunately, I don't have much time left, Mr. Chair. I understand that there has been screening, depending on the role that those individuals play with the Canadian Armed Forces. But after the conflict, was that information handed over to the IRCC and the Department of Immigration?
What? General here, sorry. Go ahead, please.
So, Mr. Chair, some of that information, if it still existed in record form, yes, that would form part of the validation process that would be given to IRCC. I think it's also important to note that many of these interpreters did not work solely for Canada. Many worked for other nations as well, especially after we pulled out in 2014. So that long and enduring relationship with Canada was also enjoyed by other countries as well.
Thank you very much.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you very much. Thank you kindly.
Madam Kwan, Honourable Member will have 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Could the officials advise how many Afghans and their family members did the department identify as having an enduring relationship with Canada? And if I could get an answer for that first question.
Here, Deputy Minister, you wanted to respond?
Maybe I'll start, and General can correct me if he has better information. My understanding is 3,800 were validated by National Defence and CAF. Of that, and forwarded to IRCC. Of that 3,800, 900 were accepted by IRCC, and that would imply they're accepted along with any family members who met the criteria. And that's the most current I have.
General Air, you want General Air to respond?
I have the same figures, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Kwan.
When the information of 900 were accepted by IRCC, can you advise what does that mean?
I would assume it means they would receive, we will have to confirm, but that it's then in the hands of IRCC to make contact and start the process. Effectively, the role of D&D would end once the validation is done and forwarded to IRCC.
What happened to the other 3,100 then?
I would assume, but again, a question for IRCC, that they are still being processed or assessed or have not been accepted, but that again is in the hands of IRCC. The process would be that the Afghanistan individual would contact the department, look for validation. D&D provides what they have and can confirm, and then it's over to IRCC. Chief, do you want to add to that?
I have nothing further to add.
Chief here? No. Okay.
Sorry, I meant 2,900, not 3,100. So I have individuals who's contacted me who has received confirmation from your department as someone who's been verified to have enduring relationship and an email from your department indicating that they have been referred to IRCC since November. And it appears that IRCC may not even have any verification that they've received this documentation. Same thing we've heard from GAC last week, where GAC had made referrals to IRCC, and then this week I found out those referrals to IRCC, officials are asking those individuals to ask GAC again for another referral. So I am quite concerned that these folks who's been identified by your department as having an enduring relationship with Canada and should be brought to safety to Canada is now just lost in the wind, because I don't know what IRCC has done with it, and they don't even know whether or not IRCC has their file, because they have no way of knowing what that decision is. Are you concerned about that? And is the department doing anything to follow up with IRCC with what's happening with those files that's been left behind?
Deputy Minister Matthews.
All I can offer at this stage, Mr. Chair, is that is, once D&D, CAF have done their validation, it goes into the IRCC process. I can't comment on how that process is or where a particular file is in their process.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm a bit distressed about this because from what we heard from GAC is that they've made the referral, and then now in contacting IRCC is saying, can you ask GAC to make the referral again? So you got to wonder what's happened to the file. So now I'm wondering, on the referrals that's been made by your department, by D&D, whether or not those actually even made it to IRCC, or has it actually been lost within IRCC?
Deputy Minister, you want to respond?
Will the department, my question then to the department is, will you undertake to follow up with IRCC to make sure the referrals that you've made are files that's not lost in the system?
Deputy Minister.
I think, Mr. Chair, this is IRCC process, and it's best left to IRCC to answer the question in terms of how they're processing.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm quite distressed about that, I have to say, because on all accounts, it seems to me that IRCC I don't know what's happening there with those files. And people have no way of knowing whether or not they're going to be able to get an issuance of an invitation. And if IRCC is not following up.
I mean, IRCC is not here, Madam Kwan. I mean, certainly they were here.
All right. I'm going to ask a different question. Since the evacuation, with the current time, is your department engaged with your counterparts with allied countries on ongoing discussion of how we can continue to work together to bring Afghans to safety?
General Air, go ahead, please.
No, Mr. Chair, no. This is a GAC lead, and so we are in support of GAC if the request comes.
So just to be clear, GAC has not asked you to engage?
That's clear. Yes.
Okay. I'm distressed by that answer as well. Maybe you can give me a quick answer. If you were asked, would you be able to engage and provide support to bring further Afghans to safety?
So, Mr. Chair, it depends on the nature of the ask, where it would be, the numbers, the security situation, what third country.
Pakistan.
So
time, please. Its time is up too, almost. And let General Air finish the conversation. Please go ahead.
No, as with any request for assistance, we would have to do an assessment. What is the nature of the request? What is the security situation? What is being asked of us, and then what options could we provide?
Mr. Hallan, thank you, Madam Kwan, and we'll go to Mr. Hallan for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the leadership team, not just for being here, but for your incredible service to Canada. I wanted to follow up on a question from my colleague, Mr. Ruff. We know the government went into caretaker mode August the 15th when the election was called. Was there any change in responses or coordination in any way after that point?
Mr. Hallan, is the particular person that you...
General? Whoever can answer.
General Air, please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, no, the briefings that we would give, briefing up, continued on a daily basis. The coordination, the interdepartmental coordination, continued on a daily basis. Like I said previously, the biggest impact was on our ability to publicly communicate.
Was that because you were told not to do it, or what was the reason behind that?
So my understanding was in the middle of the election, we were told not to.
By who?
If I could,
Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
When an election is called, you go into effectively what's called caretaker convention, which effectively puts limits around what gets publicly communicated, and it's less than when you're not in caretaker mode.
UNHCR testified at this committee that they had briefed the government January 2021 that Kabul was going to fall. Was your department ever made aware of that at all?
Mr. Chair, I wasn't aware of the UNHCR briefing, but as I said earlier, no one can forecast with 100% certainty that any action is going to happen. And I mentioned earlier what our own intelligence assessment was.
To the best of your knowledge, the interpreters that have been applying for these programs, when they first get to your department, were any interpreters that were identified as ones that served our country deemed a security risk at all at your department's level at all?
Mr. Chair, not to my knowledge.
None at all. Were there any rejected?
Not that came to my attention.
Okay. Were there any that were at your department ever deemed as rejected because of any other concerns at all that were identified as interpreters?
Mr. Chair, not to my knowledge.
Thank you. we know that our counterparts, like the Brits, they evacuated around 11,000 people from Afghanistan, and we know that through the testimony here that we had a roughly 3,700, I think it was that came out. Can you explain what the difference was between ours and our counterparts? Like why the difference in numbers?
So, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to note that when we withdrew in 2014, other allies stayed on the ground. So the British, the Americans had a long, enduring presence, and they also had a sizable presence at the Kabul International Airport after the fall of Kabul, where we didn't. And so there was a cost to pulling out in 2014, and that was one of them. But I do have to say, per capita, compared to some of our other allies, such as the French, such as the Germans, our numbers were sizably or were significantly more. And I'll ask Admiral Ochterlony to jump in, because we were talking about this earlier today.
Admiral Ochterlony, please.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you, Chief. I think that's key. That the fact is we're working with our allies throughout, but I can go back to the point about and the size of footprint on the ground. We weren't there since 2014, but we reinserted our folks prior to assist in the evacuation of, and then when Kabul fell, we actually evacuated the embassy as scheduled to. And I can expand on that point, in fact.
I think that's because I have a limited amount of time,
okay.
But I appreciate the answer. Yeah. The Toronto Sun had an article last year following the end of the Operation Aegis titled "The PMO Global Affairs Holding Off Deploying Canadian Armed Forces in Kabul." The article outlined that there was a 17-member non-combatant evacuation operation team that was waiting in Kuwait but never received orders to go into Afghanistan. The CAF members said, and I quote, "We want to go and do the right thing, but the government won't let us," end quote. Is it accurate that a NEO was deployed to Kuwait but never went into Afghanistan? And if they didn't, what was the reason for that?
General, briefly, 30 seconds left.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with that article, and in essence, we did conduct a NEO, a non-combatant evacuation operation with our troops on the ground in Kabul. You know, perhaps, and I'm speculating here.
Are you aware of the team that was waiting in Kuwait?
Admiral Ochterlony, you have something to add?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so in fact, conducting the operation, we had various capabilities in place. So we conducted a contested non-combatant evacuation operation in Kabul, consisting of one team, Task Force Arrowhead, that worked for me, and there was another one that was actually working for the commander of Special Operations Forces.
To Afghanistan?
Mr. Hallan, your time is up, and we will go to Mr. Sidhu for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Chief of Defense General Wayne. You mentioned earlier the cost of Canadian Armed Forces being pulled out in 2014 and the impacts it had on the evacuation. When we compare to our allies, it's easy to compare numbers, but General, you mentioned, with all things considered, we worked with our allies very efficiently, considering we didn't have the same number of assets on the ground as we didn't have the same type of presence as our allies. Vice Admiral Loney, you mentioned some of the details in terms of the operation, and we were cut short of time in a previous round. I'd really like to hear more about the operation and more about, the threats to our personnel, our assets on the ground, how we're able to move efficiently with all things considered. I think it's important for this community to know that.
Admiral Ochterlony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. Yeah, the conditions on the ground, as I've said before, they were tenuous, chaotic, and desperate. I think you're well aware of that. So our forces were working on the ground in that chaotic environment. Just go back to separating in two phases. So prior to the fall of Kabul, we were working in support to ensure we could evacuate. Once Kabul had fell, then we then had to conduct a contested non-combatant evacuation. And let's come back to the fall of Kabul. We have talked about the intelligence. The strategic intelligence that we led, I think it's quite consistent. All the allies, the same thing. We potentially did not have, in April we were looking at 6 months, and then as it got closer, we knew it was going to fall, but I think everyone, including the Taliban, were surprised how rapidly Kabul fell. That being said, I want to talk about the tactical intelligence on the ground with our folks. We were able to execute the evacuation of our embassy, and we're the only ally to do that. Because we had the tactical intelligence capabilities on the ground, we had the forces with the capabilities, and we had air power in to do that. So the only reason we weren't there after Kabul fell is because we were the only embassy actually able to evacuate because of the intelligence we had, because of the capabilities we had on the ground, and because of the air power we had available. Once our allies weren't able to do that, they had significant forces left on the ground because they couldn't get them out early enough. They would have if they could have. Moving on to the second part, the contested non-combatant evacuation, working with our allies again, we reinserted capabilities on the 19th of August and started flying that day. So our first flight out that day was full. It had allies on board. It had Canadian titled personnel. It had Afghans from other nations, as well as cargo, because we were part of the Allied airlift. As we ramped up the operation, as our folks and the capabilities were inserted, we had more and more Canadian titled personnel inside the airport at that point, in which time we started to fill the planes up, which you saw over that period of time. So between 19 and 26 of August, you saw us evacuate almost 3,000 personnel by using that, by effectively allowing our folks on the ground to command and make those hard decisions that they're facing. I guess the last point I'd probably say is just reiterate that the folks on the ground, they were working tirelessly for 24/7 for over a week to make sure we got as many folks out after the fall of Kabul, and they should really be commended for this. The effort they did on the ground, not only the special capabilities, but my task force on the ground, as well as our air crews working tirelessly to save as many Afghans as we had. Thank you.
Mr. Sidhu.
Thank you for that, and I'm not sure if anybody else on the leadership team wants to add to that, but I understand, there was lots of complexities. I think it was a 14-kilometer radius to hold that it took a tremendous amount of strength and hard work and grit. So if there's anything else that can be added to that, that would be very nice.
I think it's also important to note that we paid very close attention to the intelligence that was coming in, the tactical intelligence on the ground. You'll remember the suicide attack on Abbey Gate that killed a number of Americans, 13, I believe. We had Canadian Forces members in that exact location 24 hours before. And so the strike happened after we started our retrograde, after we started our downsizing, our evacuation. But that just speaks to the importance of tactical level intelligence and just how dangerous the situation was. As it was, we had a number of our armed forces members in the vicinity who were able to provide rapid combat first aid to those that were wounded as part of that attack.
20 seconds, Mr. Sidhu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to take this opportunity to again, reiterate the appreciation for the armed forces. It was definitely a difficult time, but it's just my appreciation for all the hard work that was done during that very, very tense situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sidhu. Mr. Bruno, just have 2.5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. This will be my last opportunity to speak with you, so I'd like to thank you again for being here this evening. I'd like to ask factual questions, and I don't want us to get caught up in politics here. It's not in any of our interests. Based on your expertise, General, are you aware of the existence of the Afghan National Resistance Front?
General Air?
Monsieur le Président, oui.
Mr. Chairperson, the answer is yes, I do have knowledge of that group, but I don't know many details about them. Are you aware that they controlled or would control about 3 provinces in Afghanistan, mainly in the northeastern region? Well, I'm not aware how many provinces they control, but you're aware that they do control some provinces. So based on your expertise, you are the chief of the defence staff of the nation of Canada, and I'm sure you have some intelligence on the matter. Is that group a minor player, a major player, when in the current conflict with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda? Well, I haven't received a recent evaluation on that group. Perhaps General Boivin has something to add. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Well, here's what I can add. Generally speaking, we are aware of what is happening on the ground in Afghanistan and that particular group you're referring to. Now, as to accessing their capacity, their credibility, we've reassigned a lot of intelligent resources to our ongoing operations, and it wouldn't be the best use of our resources at this current point. So you can't tell us whether they're a minor or a major player at this stage of the game?
Monsieur le Président, non.
No, I cannot, Mr. Chairperson. Well, I like clear answers. I really do. Quite a relief. Now, I don't have much time left. You probably deal with NGOs. Are there any NGOs that have broached you out in the field? And I'm sure they have, but I don't want us to get caught up in politics here, but have some of them told you of their difficulties getting humanitarian aid through because of the constraints of the Canadian Criminal Code?
Yeah, but briefly, please, go ahead.
Monsieur President, pas direct.
No, not directly, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brunel Desap. Now we'll go to Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I wonder if the department would have any concerns if Canada were to conduct biometrics of Afghans, either in third countries or in Canada after they have arrived in Canada.
So, Mr. Chair, I would have to get advice on that question. Any collection of biometrics would be in support of another department, so I unfortunately don't have a good answer for you on that.
Okay, the reason I would love to get your answer at a later time in writing to the committee. The reason why I ask is this: IRCC will say it's not up to them, that it is up to because of national security, it's up to defense and others to make that decision. And so we consequently have a situation where everybody's passing the buck to someone else. And I'm interested in knowing what can be done and how it could be done. And can Canada work in collaboration with allied countries to help to get this done? Because if based on the numbers that we have received, 3,800 to which you've referred to IRCC, only 900 has been processed, hopefully here, but maybe not. The rest of them, I don't know what's happened to them. And with respect to documentations, because of the collaboration that's required, there are situations where people literally are hiding right now and they're burning their documents at the moment. So to require them to submit those documentations is almost an impossible task. So I understand national security, but I also think that we need to step up to try and figure out what to do here and how we can proceed. So I'd love to get your advice on what Canada can do to help bring more Afghans to safety.
Admiral Octorloni, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the question. So I guess there's a few questions in there. One is, do we have the capability to do that? So I'll give you a Ukrainian answer right now. So right now, the Canadian Armed Forces are supporting RCC at the Biometric Operations Center in Warsaw. I was going to say Rzeszów, in Warsaw. So we are supporting that, working with the IRCC to support the biometric operations for the visas for Ukrainians coming to Canada. So is the capability available? Yes. In fact, based on my experience on the Joint Staff in 2015 with the Syrian refugees, we had done this in a third nation. I guess the key point in this is we are doing it in Warsaw right now with a cooperative ally. So we have host nation consent to conduct this with our partners in Warsaw, with the Poles, to actually be doing this on behalf of our IRCC is leading it. We are supporting. So is the capability available? Yes. The issue, I think, the question is, it'd be speculative. You would have to have host nation consent to be able to do it in a third nation, and that is probably not a question for this department.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. Time is up, and we will go to Madam Finlay for. Ms. Kwan,
I'm going to defer to
okay, I'll do that.
Chong.
So we will go to Honorable Chong for 4 minutes and some. So let's go 4 minutes each between you and other Liberals. Honorable Chong, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy Minister and Generals, for appearing in front of our committee. As you know, Canada paid a high price for the war in Afghanistan. We had some 40,000 service members who rotated through that theater, 158 deaths from the Canadian Armed Forces, 1 diplomat who was also killed, and over 2,000 Canadians wounded or injured, some with horrific injuries during that war. During the 2011 to 2014 period, NATO military commanders, including Canadian military commanders, assured their elected legislatures that the training mission was going well. They assured the public that they were making tremendous progress on the cornerstone of the war in Afghanistan's strategy, which was to build a national Afghan army and a national Afghan police force that could defend the country. Canada trained that Afghan National Army and that Afghan National Police Force. There were some 1,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces who participated in that training mission during that time. The events of last August make clear that the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police Force were very poorly trained. The Afghanistan papers, which were published by the Washington Post just before the pandemic and somehow did not get enough attention as a result of the pandemic, make it clear that at the time, NATO military personnel on the ground did not have the same view of the training mission. I quote, they said that the Afghan military and police force were unmotivated, poorly trained, corrupt, riddled with deserters and infiltrators. The opposite of what NATO military commanders were saying at the time. And so my question is, some of you were involved at the time in that training mission, that NATO mission. Did you believe at the time, as General Matthijs and General John Allen said at the time, that the mission was going very well, the training mission? Or did you see at the time how much of a problem the training mission was?
Chief here, please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, that is a great question, because yes, I was involved at that time, as was others in this room with part of a NATO training mission Afghanistan. And at the time, I referred back to my notes from that I journaled at the time, and the Afghan National Security Forces at that time were missing a number of things: logistics, the ability to plan and sustain themselves, higher level planning capacity, the ability to plan and sustain operations, personnel management, the ability to properly manage the progression, the pay, the welfare of their people. But could they fight? It depended on leadership. And I've seen Afghan units in the fight who performed very well based on the leadership that they had. They would take the fight to the enemy, and they would prevail. Others, and I go back to my comment in the earlier section, if the leadership was not in place, no, they wouldn't fight. So, like any war, the decisive element is leadership, is that will to win, is that desire to be successful. And I think that was the lacking part. Yeah, the training that was provided was good training. The equipment that was provided was good equipment.
Okay, I'll just finish by saying this. There seems to be a disconnect between what we were told at the time at parliamentary committees and what U.S. congressional members were told at the time by their respective militaries about how well the training mission was going on, and what military members on the ground at the time were telling their more senior reports. And so I hope there are lessons learned from all of this, because clearly the members on the ground had it right, and the senior military commanders who told both Parliament and Congress something very different had it wrong. And I think the events of last August proved that to be the case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chong. Your time is up, but I will give floor to Mr. General Ayer. Please go ahead if you have to respond.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I've got a good response to that, other than, wasn't here for that testimony that was given.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chong. And we'll go to Mr. Al-Khoury for 4 and some minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fall of Kabul was a surprise for most of the world. Was it a surprise for you, or did you know in advance? If yes, in how long? Months, weeks, days, hours? what was the reaction and how was the coordination between the commander on the field and the headquarters and the other allied forces over there?
Chief here.
So, Mr. Chair, another great question, and it speaks to the intelligence that we talked about before, about it becoming increasingly apparent that the Afghan government would not be able to hold on, but we are not sure for how long. And when we take a look at historical analogies, which are always useful, in 1989, when the Soviet Union pulled out, there were many forecasts that Afghanistan would fall immediately. But the government held on for 3 years because the money kept falling. 1842, with the British in Kabul, it changed overnight, and the city turned against them. And so historical analogies in this case didn't exactly play out. But with the amount of government forces that were moving back into Kabul, there was a sense that, there would be the ability to hold on to the capital city for longer than it actually did. So, there was a certain degree of surprise, even though the intelligence was showing there was some inevitability to this. But I also think the Taliban were surprised by this, by the rapidity of their victory, and we've seen some intelligence to indicate that as well.
I think that we all would have wanted Canada to be able to evacuate more persons. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the Canadian Armed Forces and all Canadians that have worked for national defence, particularly you, and everyone that supported the evacuation efforts by way of the air bridge. And I think that it was worthwhile, and I think that it's worthwhile trying to understand the reality in the field and the obstacles that existed at that time with a view to better planning in future evacuation flights. Could you please speak to some of those challenges you did face at the time?
Mr. President, merci beaucoup pour le...
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you for the comments. I'm also very proud of our members and everything that they did throughout the crisis.
What could we have done? What else could have been better? Well, I talked earlier about our strategic lift and that capability that we currently have. 15 years ago, when we didn't have this capability, we could not have done this operation. So I think that capability is a game changer. We haven't had any questions directed to the commander of the Air Force, Lieutenant General Al Meinzinger, and I'll just ask him to jump in and talk about our strategic lift capability, because it is so important for what we did in Afghanistan, what we're doing to support Ukraine today, and what we're doing to support operations around the world.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks.
Lieutenant General Meinzinger, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Indeed, I like the term game changer. I think the investment we made 10, 15 years ago in acquiring a C-17 fleet has really contributed to our ability to be a global military. I reflect back on the mission in Mali il y a 3 ans, task force into the desert of Mali, largely by utilizing our C-17 fleet. So I think a strategic lift, as we saw play out in this context, proved to be invaluable. And I would just like to add to the comments made about the team. I couldn't be more proud of the crews, the maintenance personnel that were back in Kuwait that worked largely 24/7, surged over a 2-week period to keep that mission going. It was an all-hands-on-deck effort, and I think we all should be proud of that. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Alkuri. This is all done, and this brings our meeting to an end. Madam Kwan, before I thank the deputy, you want me to go thank them and come back to you?
Sure.
Okay. First, on behalf of the committee members, I would start with thanking the Deputy Minister Matthews for your public service and being with us today. Appreciate that. And now to the leadership team of our country in uniform. I'll start with the Chief of Defense Staff, General Ayer. thank you for being here, and thank you for the sacrifices, the commitment, yourself and your whole leadership and the men and women in uniform to defend our nation, Canada. The next one with us is Vice Admiral Dr. Loney. Thank you for being with us here as well, and again, your service, sacrifice, and commitment. We also were joined by Major General Mr. Bowen, who was with us virtually, and want to thank you on behalf of the committee members, and thank you for your service and commitment to our great nation. Last but not least, Lieutenant General Meinzinger, thank you and for finishing the conversation as well, and your commitment and sacrifices that you and your team members have made. So many thanks, and I would like the officials can.
And Major General Boivin online.
I already mentioned.
Did you mention him?
I
Okay, didn't
mention.
hear that.
Of course, if my own member, want to bring it to my attention because she's my honorable member representing me, Madam Finley, I did acknowledge Major General Bowen earlier.
He was lonely sitting there.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate that. Now I'll take the last few seconds, Madam Kwan, before I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the committee can indulge this request. In light of what we've heard from the representatives from the Department of National Defense, if we can ask IRCC to confirm that they have received the 3,800 applications referred by D&D, and to advise how many have been processed with an invitation and assigned a G number, how many have arrived in Canada, and when could the rest of the 2,900 applications expect to be processed? If I could ask the committee through to the clerk to submit that request to IRCC. I don't know if I need a motion in that regard. If I do, I'll move that as a motion.
If there is a unanimous consent within the membership, then she's okay. And do I see the unanimous? No, there's
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I wasn't asking for unanimous consent. I'm just moving this as a motion.
So you have the right to move the motion and
let's vote.
Point of order. Point of order, Chair.
On a point of Mr. Baker, before I give you the floor, can we ask the Deputy Minister and the leadership team in uniform that they can go, because this is nothing to do with them. So I do appreciate that, and thank you for your time and efforts today. Okay, so so now I will, because there's a motion on the floor. I still have the quorum, and I'm Mr. Baker and then Mr. Sidhu. I see your hand is up. So, Mr. Baker, floor is yours.
Chair, I wonder if you could help me understand. So the request is from IRCC, who's not before us at this moment. So in my mind, could I just ask you to consult with our clerk? Is this request even in order?
Committee had its own destiny, Mr. Baker, and they can bring whatever they want to, and it's up to us as a majority membership on the committee to make that decision. Mr. Brutusap, I'll come back to you. Mr. Sidhu had his hand raised before. Mr. Sidhu, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think out of respect for both official languages, the norm is with other committees, these motions are presented in both official languages in advance so we can have a look.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
I'll go to Honorable Chong.
Point of order. On a point of order, that is incorrect, Mr. Chair. Motions that are presented orally, because of translation that is made available ubiquitously throughout the committees and the chamber, can be presented in the language of the member's choice.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That is correct. And if Ms. Sidhu finished the conversation, I'll go to Mr. Bruno Desai.
Yes, please. I've been on other committees out of respect to my honorable colleague that it has happened in the past where we had it in writing.
Ms. Sidhu, the general rule is that it can be in any language when it's brought in verbally. So thank you. And we'll go to Mr. Bruno Desai. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And even though the motion was moved in English, I heard the translation through my earpiece, so I'd call for the vote on the motion, Mr. Chair.
Call on the vote. Okay. Before I call the vote, there are two hands up, and Mr. Al-Khoury and then Mr. Baker.
Question, Mr. Chair. Can we move a motion before a notice?
We're fine. Okay, so should we go to the vote now? I'm going to call the clerk, honorable clerk of the committee to call the vote. Mr. Baker, you had something to add? I see you had your hand up. So
no, that's fine, Chair.
Same. Okay, thank you. And go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
Please call the vote.
On motion of Ms. Kwan, Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Mr. Seri.
No.
Mr. El-Khoury.
No.
Mr. Sidhu.
No.
Ms. Zahid.
No.
Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Ms. Findlay.
Yes.
Mr. Halan.
In favor.
Mr. Ruff.
In favor.
Monsieur Brunet-Sepp.
Pour.
Ms. Kwan.
In favor.
6-4.
6-4 and
six in favor and 5 opposed.
6 in favor and 5 opposed, so the motion is carried. Thank you, and I adjourn the meeting.